morning. I'm Grace Martin with the North Tampa Bay Chamber, and today we have Dr. Irma Campos speaking to us. She's a licensed psychologist, career consultant, and president of Interface Consulting and Psychological Services. She specializes in career coaching, counseling, executive coaching, and leadership development trainings in areas such as emotional intelligence and diversity and inclusion. She obtained a Ph.D. in counseling psychology from the University of Florida. She's previously held positions as a leadership development consultant and career counselor. Today she's going to be talking to us about effective networking. So welcome, and come on up, Dr. Campos.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I want to really start off identifying the objectives for today's presentation. I think that's really important, of course. Understanding emotional intelligence is one of the key objectives for today, is really understanding kind of the framework, the idea of emotional intelligence, and how you can further develop it as well. Also, defining appropriate networking strategies. How many of you have seen the benefits of networking in your own careers? I would say yes, absolutely. And then also integrating emotional intelligence strategies into networking interactions as well. So just to share a little bit about me, I think that's very important as a presenter, so you get the chance to know on a deeper level kind of who's really speaking to you. I really feel that a lot of my family and cultural values, my parents being Panamanian, from a more collectivistic culture, have informed my desire to really serve others. Part of why I pursued a degree in psychology, I wanted to be able to help others in their professional development, and part of why I also am so committed to general personal development as well. And I'm currently the president of Interface Consulting and Psychological Services, serving the greater Tampa Bay area. Very excited to have recently started. And I also have both a consulting and counseling practice. So I do leadership development consulting and then also career counseling, executive coaching, etc. And I've gained a lot of my experience, in areas of career development. So how can individuals further develop their career? How can they stay engaged in their career? That is such a key part of success, is staying engaged constantly and knowing what are effective strategies to implement and knowing ourselves very well, which is part of being emotionally intelligent. And like I received a Ph.D. in counseling psychology from the University of Florida. Go Gators, yes. And again, kind of career counseling, leadership development training across various industries, from telecommunications to also working with the healthcare industry and helping executives further develop areas such as diversity and inclusion, working in a culturally sensitive manner with patients, etc. And I want to offer a complimentary coaching session to individuals who are here today. It is an offer that I want to make and just something that I want to really provide to you as participants of the presentation for today. So feel free to contact me. Emotional intelligence, let's start off with a definition. This is a very technical definition, but I think it really captures the concept. So it's really the ability to perceive accurately, appraise, and express emotion, the ability to access and or generate feelings when they facilitate thought, the ability to understand emotion and emotional knowledge, and the ability to regulate our emotions to promote emotional intellectual growth. So that's a mouthful, right? So my way of condensing it is how to understand and manage one's own and others' emotions to reach goals in a very strategic manner. So that's a condensed version. It's really about accessing, understanding, having awareness, and then appropriately responding to emotions in order to meet specific goals, such as career development, such as networking strategies, etc. So a little condensed version for you. What is really the importance of emotional intelligence, you might ask? With emotional intelligence kind of being a recently new concept, there's a lot of research that has come out to support the importance of emotional intelligence. Various studies, including the first one that I cited, have predicted emotional intelligence dictates performance above and beyond IQ and personality traits. So above and beyond extroversion, for example, emotional intelligence predicts performance in workplace settings. So these are studies that have been conducted across various industries with various individuals, really providing support for the importance of emotional intelligence. Also, leader emotional intelligence, let's say you have a supervisor, right, in your workplace setting, has been positively related to subordinate satisfaction in workplace settings as well. So leaders who tend to exhibit emotionally intelligent behaviors tend to have employees that are much more satisfied in their workplaces, meaning that that also leads to reduced turnover, more productivity, and all these other positive outcomes that not just only benefit the individual, but also the organization as a whole. So there really is a lot of evidence to support the importance of emotional intelligence. So a brief little case study, PepsiCo executives were found to have high EQ, so high emotional intelligence, were 10% more productive and demonstrated an 87% reduction in turnover. So that's in PepsiCo and various other organizations, but just kind of to give you an example of something that really signifies the importance of emotional intelligence for individuals themselves and then also for the organization, right? Because turnover can cost an organization so much and can really also impact employee morale and employee engagement, all these other outcomes as well. And I'm sure we can reflect on our own personal experiences and kind of have evidence for that as well. So really, yes, just capturing again kind of the impact that it can have on teams, on organizations, even on our own level of stress and our own physical and mental health as well. So emotional intelligence in much of the literature is really divided into a couple of facets. So if we think about emotional intelligence from the self perspective, there's self-awareness and then there's self-management. So that's the part where we're understanding our emotions and also managing our emotions, right? So understanding that, when I am conducting a presentation, I might get a little bit anxious. That's part of my emotional intelligence. Then self-management is part of coping with those emotions, part of reacting to those emotions in a way that is effective, in a way that is intended to meet my goals. So a way of doing that would be me engaging in some deep breathing exercises before this presentation, or me really centering myself, or having some coffee, right? That would be a way to manage those emotions after I understand and identify what they are. The next facet is other or social. So we think about kind of outside of ourselves. This goes to the relationship piece that was being discussed in the video. So the other part is divided into two facets as well. So awareness of others, awareness of social situations, and then also managing those social situations well. That encompasses things like relationship building, appropriately responding to conflict, appropriately answering, someone's question when asked something in particular. So it's really about being able to understand others' emotions and then respond accordingly. So that's kind of a general framework, and I think it helps to understand it divided into those facets to kind of simplify really how emotional intelligence works. So some strategies to implement, right? Let's get into the good stuff. Actually, how can you develop emotional intelligence? Self-awareness. This is the first facet of the self portion of emotional intelligence. One way is just to really ask yourself, what am I feeling? How can I identify what my emotions are? So if you have a difficult time identifying emotions, which by the way, the vast majority of individuals do, you can have maybe a list of emotions that you can choose from and say, this is the emotion that I'm feeling in this moment. And this is how I know because I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, let's say, in my body. So I'm feeling a certain sensation in my body, so therefore I am feeling this emotion. So just identification is oftentimes the first step. And then being mindful. So mindful really means to be aware, to be accepting without judgment of what we're feeling. So many times we have attachments and judgments really based on what we're feeling, but being mindful is more about just being present in this moment without judgment about what we're feeling. So kind of bringing that level of mindfulness can certainly help with self-awareness as well. Self-management, so reflecting on past effective coping skills, right, for emotions, that makes sense. So reflecting on when I have, let's say, handled conflict, what worked well? What did I do that helped me manage maybe some of the difficulties in managing conflict? So let's say one of them was, not responding immediately to an individual who perhaps triggered me, taking some time, right, to step away, taking some time to reflect or even role play the scenario in order to effectively address the conflict from both perspectives. That's a way to really engage in self-management. Also challenging unhelpful preceding thoughts. So this is part of cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that, but that is a popular form of therapy involved in many psychological talk therapies. And the idea is that oftentimes our thoughts are connected to our emotions, which are connected to our behaviors. So the idea is really that if we can change the way that we think many times the way we think about others, about ourselves, about the world, we can change the way that we feel. So a way to manage our own emotions is to think, what is an unhelpful preceding thought? Let's say that I had a thought about managing conflict that was not helpful. For example, thinking this person is going to respond negatively to me. That would probably be an unhelpful preceding thought that I might challenge and might address in order to better manage my own emotions. The other facets, so other and social awareness, really listening deeply and carefully. It's very hard, I think, in many workplace settings, given how fast-paced they are, to take the time to simply just listen to someone's perspective and actively listen. So checking in and asking, I think I heard you say this. Is that correct? Trying to listen for emotion and for content as well. So trying to listen for the person's point of view, and then also listening how they might feel as well is important, and then checking in on that as well. And asking clarifying questions, that's where a lot of miscommunication, of course, can occur, is where we make assumptions that might not be correct about what someone is saying. In one of the engagements that I engaged in as a consultant, I had physicians who were exceptional at their work. They were exceptional surgeons, exceptional, let's say, general physicians. They were doing very well technically. They had developed that area of expertise very well. However, what happened oftentimes with their interactions with patients is that patients did not feel heard, patients did not feel supported in making the decisions that were best for them, and they did not feel like they were taken into account in that process. And so although these physicians had developed exceptional skills in their technical areas, they had not developed those soft skills that the video referred to. And so they were not engaging and listening deeply and carefully, which was negatively impacting patient outcomes and patient satisfaction. So that's just a brief example of how important it really is to listen deeply and carefully and ask the other person's perspective and ask clarifying questions. So other and social engagement, or management, is really about learning how others cope and respond to stress. So how do others really, react when they're in a stressful situation? And how can you kind of predict that? How can you help facilitate their response in an effective way to stress? I think it's also important to ask for feedback. I know that's probably challenging, but it's important to ask for feedback, especially from our peers, especially from trusted advisors. Ask, how do I sometimes come across? We all have areas of growth. I know I certainly do. And it's important to know concretely, what can I do to improve in the ways that I'm interacting with others? So asking for that feedback is sometimes that first step. So the importance of networking, to kind of transition over and integrating the two, both emotional intelligence and networking, 80% of jobs are never advertised, right? I think also reflecting on your own career experiences, you can identify how networking has led to many benefits, both personally, professionally, etc. It's really an ongoing process, of course. It's about relationship building. It's about engaging in opportunities to learn and providing opportunities to learn, because it's a mutually beneficial relationship and process. And it's something that is developed over time. So it is not something that's just kind of a one and done deal. I went to a networking event, handed my business card, and now, everything is going to work out exceptionally well. No, it really is something that takes time and ongoing development and emotional intelligence, especially that facet of other social awareness and other social management. So networking resources, I just want to share some ideas, especially for individuals who might be young professionals, who might be entering the workforce. Friends, family, former professors, former employers. Also, having opportunities to shadow a job can be a great opportunity to network. And again, to also learn, and especially learn, day to day, what does that exact job look like? And be able to ask questions that oftentimes we don't get a chance to ask of professionals who are engaged in their workplaces. Informational interviewing, there have been many times where I have cold contacted individuals via LinkedIn. That is a way to really just connect and be able to say, can I ask you a few questions about your field, about your industry, about your position? How did you get to where you got to? Because everyone has a very fascinating professional journey, I have learned, and many times it has taken many different turns and many different kind of events that have been very spontaneous or unexpected that have led them to point A, or from point A to point B to C, etc. So also internships and externships for individuals who are still pursuing education, a great opportunity to also connect, to also network, to also develop skills and demonstrate skills as well. Professional organizations, of course, such as the Chamber of Commerce, is a great way to be able to connect heavily with individuals, and again, on that ongoing basis is really the key. And then alumni associations, also great because there's already kind of that shared identity, right? That shared sense of community when you enter that alumni association. Career fairs, also a great opportunity, especially if you continue to connect with that individual and you continue to provide, help and support to them as well. And speaking engagements. So speaking engagements can be a great opportunity to interact with your potential clients, with individuals that you're interested in really learning from and that are interested in learning from you as well. So integrating the two, kind of to really seamlessly interact both of them, self-awareness, to really develop that in networking and really effectively implement it in networking, it's important to know your triggers, right? So know how you respond to stress, know what stresses you out, and identify those emotions before networking. So like I said, kind of checking in with yourself and saying, how am I feeling right now? What would I label this exact emotion? And how do I know that I'm feeling it? Okay, typically, let's say when I feel a little upset or anxious, I might have sweaty palms. Okay, I have sweaty palms right now, so that must mean that I'm feeling anxious. So that's a way to identify and have that self-awareness before you enter a networking situation or a networking setting. Then managing yourself is really about, again, engaging in those coping skills that have been helpful in the past, and maybe even trying out new ones, of course, is always helpful. But for example, grounding is a coping skill that tends to be very helpful for people when they're experiencing an emotion that is a little bit difficult to sit with. So that includes really connecting with your five senses. So for example, noticing what you're seeing in the moment, noticing what you're smelling in the moment, noticing what you're touching in the moment, just basically connecting with all of those five senses to bring you to the present moment. It's part of creating that sense of mindfulness that I mentioned earlier. And then if triggers are bringing up those unhelpful thoughts that we talked about that might precede the emotion, challenge them. Our thoughts are not necessarily always reality, right? Our thoughts can sometimes be informed from our past experiences, from maybe a certain situation that's triggering those past experiences. So challenging whatever unhelpful thoughts might be preceding those specific emotions that are a little bit hard to sit with. Now, in terms of other awareness, it's really about noticing how others are responding to you, noticing perhaps their body language. And then a way to connect with them is to model their body language, to really kind of, connect with them in a way that feels genuine, model kind of what they're also expressing. In terms of managing relationships, managing the situation socially, it's important to engage in behaviors that make others feel heard, like we've talked about a little bit. Important to make eye contact, important to, nod, to smile, to lean in, to shake someone's hand appropriately, to ask them clarifying questions if you're not sure, to ask them open-ended questions about themselves. Those are ways to have people feel heard, to feel validated, and to feel, kind of going back to that scenario in the hospital setting, to feel like they're part of the process that they're engaging in with you rather than you just engaging with them. Get feedback that's concrete, specific, and actionable, right? Let's say you ask your trusted advisor, how have I been coming across in this specific area? They tell you, well, there's some questions about how you might come off. Follow up and ask them, what can I do to improve? Or what am I doing well? Can you tell me specific behaviors that I can continue to engage in and behaviors that I should no longer engage in? Whenever we get feedback, it's really important for it to be very specific and concrete. And the last part that I really wanted to talk about, something that we do in consulting oftentimes is to develop action plans, because really what's important is the behaviors that we're addressing, the behaviors that we're changing. So I want you just to reflect, I think for the purposes of the presentation, you can just reflect within yourself one strategy of emotional intelligence that you want to address. So one area that you feel you could further develop, that you would like to further develop, that could really benefit, let's say, your networking activities and your business and your line of work. Now, eventually discuss with a partner, discuss with a trusted advisor, and receive feedback about that strategy that you want to work on and the specific behavior that you'll engage in to address that specific strategy. And work on this on an ongoing basis. Check up with yourself, let's say in 1 month, in 2 months, in 3 months, and say, what is the progress that I have made? Have I actually engaged in those behaviors, or did I just kind of write it down and say, I'll go back to it eventually? Really, it should be something that you're doing on an ongoing basis, of course. And then seek support through coaching. It's important for the person to have training both in psychology, career development, whoever that might be. That helps to really integrate both, I think, things like emotional intelligence and then an understanding of careers. And it's been a pleasure. I am happy to answer any questions that you might have and happy to, kind of take any questions now at this moment.
I have a few questions.
Yes.
So we notice a lot in networking, people come into the room and they have no idea what to do first.
Mm-hmm.
And I think someone mentioned it earlier that it's taken them years and years. What would you recommend to somebody walking into a room that they know no one, and what would be their first step of starting to get the EQ and the vibe of the room?
Yeah, I think that is oftentimes one of the challenges that many individuals experience, especially early in their career development, right? Especially early on when they have not engaged in networking often. I would say having a set of questions prepared beforehand, so having an idea of what it is you want to get out of the event exactly. So identifying, okay, I would like to understand a little bit more about this field. I would like to understand a little bit more about this industry. And also remembering that what's important is to genuinely connect. So also to share yourself as an individual, to share, a little tidbit about yourself, to really kind of learn about the person as well. So I would say having a set of prepared questions, sharing yourself genuinely and authentically, and then being able, to follow up with the individual and say, I would love to meet with you individually. Can we at some point meet? And that might also facilitate them feeling a little bit more comfortable on a one-on-one setting.
So you talked about career development in terms of EQ, and I am in a new position, with a new organization, a new practice, where I'm doing much more marketing and networking than I ever have.
Yeah.
So what are some pieces of advice as far as integrating EQ into marketing?
Great question. I think EQ is probably a really significant area to integrate into marketing, because marketing is really about understanding the needs of the client, and not just their needs on the surface, but their underlying needs as well. So I would say one of the ways to really do that is to identify your target populations and to really access how they feel as a result of having that need that is unmet. And then identifying what can you do to fill that need that they have that is unmet, and communicating that through marketing materials, through interactions and networking, especially if it comes across genuinely, which I think many of us, have known when something does not come across genuine. That is important. And I think those are some strategies that you could certainly integrate. It's kind of placing yourself in that position, taking that perspective.
So on top of that, how do you assess? Are there some cues, some questions I might ask myself in terms of how I'm coming across? I don't have any trusted advisors with me. I don't want to come across too strongly. I want to come across genuinely, which I think I sort of do. But what are some ways to know self-assessment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say reading how others are responding to you. Are they also leaning in? Are they also engaging with you? Or are they kind of taking a step back with their body language? So what is really their body language indicating in response to you? Are individuals quickly ending the conversation consecutively? That may be an indicator, let me do something a little bit different. Let me ask them perhaps more questions. Let me share a little bit about myself personally, rather than just coming across as only being interested in their profession and the industry and only. So I think reading body language, are they leaning in? Are they nodding? Are they interested? How long is the conversation taking? So kind of noticing more things that are subtle rather than overt, because many times there will be subtle indicators of that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
A lot of times when I'm at a networking event, sometimes you're attacked by people who just stuff their business card right up under your nose.
Yes.
And to me, that's a great turnoff.
Yes.
I don't know how to react to it, but I know that I will never call on them. And with one exception, there was one guy. He turned out to be a nice guy after a while, but he really had a disadvantage approaching me later on because of how he had acted when I first met him.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I feel like I wanted to tell him that, they are really doing a disfavor to themselves by acting in this manner and not taking the time to learn, to know about the person they're approaching. And so they're really at a disadvantage. How can I handle it differently and really give them some advice without coming across as being lecturing or
Right, and condescending perhaps.
exactly.
Or,
Yeah.
And I think great perspective. What I think is important is to ask someone for permission whenever you're going to give feedback, is to say, is it okay if I give you a piece of advice? Is it okay if I give you a piece of feedback? As someone who maybe has been at these events many times and been a member of the chamber, if the person gives you permission and they say, yes, absolutely, I think that means they're open to that feedback and open to implementing it. So if at that point it seems like they are, then I think that it is doing them, a favor and providing them some valuable feedback to share the way that you perhaps came across, was not the most genuine. There might be a different way that you might share your business card, in a way that might be a little bit more effective. So I think that might be, the first step, is asking for permission.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure.
So my nugget and takeaway from this was, don't respond immediately. Stop and think about your reaction and what your reaction is going to be perceived as. And so taking that little moment to stop and think. So thank you.
My name is Cindy Ross with RP&G Printing, and my takeaway was knowing your triggers and that advice about grounding yourself. Coming into these events, I do get nervous. I'm nervous right now. I don't like to talk in front of people, but knowing those, being aware to recognize my triggers and those 5 senses of reconnecting and grounding, I find helpful and something I didn't know before. So thank you.
I'm Helge Oren. I'm a registered rep with New York Life Insurance Company. I found it very helpful. Some of the things I've heard before, but it was even reinforced the way you presented it. And I think it was very helpful also to, at the end, when I asked you about the networking situation, that it really is a skill that takes time to be acting appropriately in a networking situation. So I think that was very good. So thank you.
My name is Toby Karsh. I'm with Visionary Eye Care, and my nuggets are very similar to everybody's. I loved the information about grounding oneself. It's something I heard many years ago and forgot about, but now I'm going to do it more frequently. And that kind of plays into the not reacting right away, thinking things through, especially when an emotion happens. I'm thinking more in the workplace rather than in networking. Maybe with a client or something like that, or just keeping a really positive environment for oneself, but using these techniques to do that.